The thunder cracks, and your dog presses himself into the corner of the room, body shaking, tail tucked tightly beneath him. You do exactly what every instinct tells you to do. You sit down directly in front of him, look him in the eyes, wrap your arms around him, and say the words every owner says. It's okay, I'm here. A few minutes later, he stops shaking, he goes still. You feel a wave of relief, because it looks like it worked, but what you just watched may not have been comfort taking hold at all. It may have been something far more unsettling, and if you have ever stayed close to your dog during a moment like this without knowing the difference, you need to understand what you were actually looking at. Almost every dog owner believes the same thing about comfort. Staying close is always good. Presence is always soothing. If your dog is scared, sitting beside him, holding him, looking into his eyes, should make things better, the same way it would for a frightened child. This belief comes from real human experience, from a lifetime of learning that closeness heals fear. But dogs are not small humans wearing fur, and the way their nervous system reads closeness during fear is built on an entirely different set of signals, signals most owners have never been taught to read. Animal behaviorists who study canine body language have noticed something that quietly contradicts the comfort instinct almost every owner relies on. In dogs, direct frontal orientation, sustained eye contact, and a human body positioned squarely in front of a stressed dog are not universally read as safety. In the language dogs use with each other, approaching straight on, staring, and looming over another dog are signals closer to confrontation than comfort. A calm, friendly dog curves his approach, turns his body slightly, glances away. Researchers studying canine communication, including work built on the concept trainer Turid Rugas, popularized as calming signals, have cataloged a whole vocabulary dogs use to diffuse tension: head turns, lip licks, yawns, slow blinking, a body angled away rather than toward. These are not random quirks, they are a dog's way of saying I am not a threat, and when a frightened dog is met with the opposite, a face pushed close, eyes locked on, arms wrapped tightly around him, his nervous system may not receive the message of comfort you intend to send. You have probably seen this yourself without realizing what you were witnessing. The dog who seems to calm down the moment you hold him during a storm, going quiet, stopping the shaking. Every owner reads this as success, but here is the surprising part. Stillness is not the same thing as calm, and behaviorists have spent years learning to tell the difference. There is a concept in behavioral science called flooding, and it explains something that looks exactly like what just happened in that living room. Flooding occurs when an animal is exposed to a source of fear at full intensity, with no way to escape it, until the fear response eventually shuts down, not because the animal has resolved the fear, but because continuing to react has become physiologically unsustainable. From the outside, this looks like calm. The shaking stops. But underneath that stillness is exhaustion, a state close to what psychologists studying other species have called learned helplessness, a shutdown that happens when an animal concludes that struggling will not change the outcome, so the system simply stops trying. This idea did not originate with dogs, and knowing where it came from makes the pattern harder to unsee. Psychologists studying learned helplessness found that animals placed in situations where nothing they did changed an unpleasant outcome eventually stopped attempting to change it, even later, in different situations where escape had become possible. Apply that to a dog held tightly through repeated frightening moments, storm after storm, and you start to see why some dogs eventually stop shaking altogether, not because the fear resolved, but because some part of them concluded reacting no longer served any purpose. Owners often celebrate this as the dog getting used to it. Behaviorists see something more sobering underneath, but there is something even more important still to come, because this same pattern shows up anywhere a dog is held close during genuine fear, at the vet, during a nail trim, in a crowded space, and in each case the instinct to hold tighter can tip a frightened animal from active distress into quiet shutdown, and the two can look almost identical to an untrained eye. There is a physiological piece of this story that makes the picture clearer. Cortisol, the hormone tied to stress, has been measured in dogs during exactly these interactions, and researchers have found that outward behavior and internal stress levels do not always move together. A dog can appear settled while cortisol readings tell an entirely different story underneath. This gap is why so many owners have believed their presence was working, when in reality their dog had simply learned that resistance changed nothing. This is the part that changes everything, because understanding why closeness can backfire is only useful once you understand what your dog's nervous system is actually asking for instead, and it is not what most people expect.
Dogs experiencing fear are not primarily asking for physical closeness. They are asking for a sense of control, the ability to choose distance and movement for themselves rather than having that choice made for them, even by someone they trust. A dog cornered against a wall held in place by well-meaning arms, has no ability to control his own space, regardless of how gently he is held. A dog given the freedom to move toward you, retreat under a table, or sit near you without restraint retains a form of agency. His nervous system reads as safer, even if the actual threat has not changed at all. This same principle shows up across species far beyond dogs. Studies on stress response in animals ranging from rodents to primates consistently find that the ability to exert even minimal control over an aversive situation changes how the nervous system processes it, often more than the intensity of the event itself. This is the truth the title of this video has been pointing toward from the first second. Never stay pressed close to a frightened dog without knowing whether your body language is actually communicating safety, because the same instinct that feels like love from a human perspective can, in canine terms, read as pressure, and pressure applied to an overwhelmed nervous system does not dissolve fear. It suppresses the appearance of it. Translate this into what it means for the dog experiencing it. Your dog is not simply going quiet during the storm. Some part of him may be concluding that nothing he does changes what happens next, so he stops trying. That is not trust settling in. That is a small, private collapse happening in front of you, mistaken for peace because it looks so much like it. This does not mean staying near your dog during fear is wrong. The real issue was never proximity. It was the specific shape that proximity takes. A dog trembling through a storm does not need a face inches from his own, locked in, unblinking eye contact. He needs something quieter than that. Behaviorists who work with fearful dogs describe a completely different physical language for offering safety. Turning your body sideways instead of squaring off in front of him. Sitting near him rather than looming over him. Softening your eyes and glancing away instead of a steady stare. Letting your voice drop low and slow instead of urgent, because urgency itself, even wrapped in comforting words, can register as tension he picks up before he processes the words at all. And most importantly, letting him choose the distance, allowing him to close that final gap himself, rather than closing it for him. Instead of no control, he experiences some control. And that shift can be the difference between a dog who settles because the fear has genuinely eased and a dog who goes quiet because resistance has run out. This correction does not ask you to love your dog less, only to offer that love in a shape his nervous system was built to recognize as safety instead of pressure. A curved approach instead of a straight one, a lowered posture instead of a loom, a softened gaze instead of a locked one. Space offered instead of space closed. This reframes something else too. In the quieter, everyday moments most owners never examine. The dog who goes unusually still when a stranger reaches to pet him. The dog who freezes rather than pulling away when a child hugs him too tightly. For years, this stillness has been misread as a dog who is simply calm, tolerant, easygoing. But stillness born from genuine comfort looks physically different from stillness born from the conclusion that resistance is pointless. Ears held low but rigid rather than relaxed. A closed mouth instead of loose panting. A tail held stiff rather than soft. A body gone quiet without ever going loose. None of this means every calm dog is secretly suffering. Most stillness genuinely is what it appears to be. But now you have a way of noticing the difference in the moments that matter most, because your instinct to stay close needs to be paired with an instinct to stay close correctly. Your dog cannot tell you when holding him tighter is making things worse instead of better. He does not have the words, and by the time shutdown has taken over, he may no longer have the energy left to protest at all. The responsibility for recognizing the difference between comfort and collapse falls entirely on you, not because you have done anything wrong so far, but because almost nobody teaches this distinction, and most owners spend years loving their dogs through exactly this pattern, never once suspecting that the quiet moment they treasured most might have been their dog's smallest, most private surrender. The fix does not require less love or less closeness. It requires a slightly different shape of both. The next time your dog trembles through something frightening, notice where your body is facing. Notice whether your eyes are locked onto his or softened and glancing away. Notice whether he is choosing to lean into you or simply unable to move away. That single observation will teach you more about what real comfort looks like for your dog than any general rule ever could. That is the real answer this video was promising from the beginning. It was never really about staying or not staying. It was about knowing, before you stay, whether the way you are staying tells your dog he is safe. or quietly tells him there is nowhere left to go. If this changed the way you think about the moments you have spent comforting your dog, sit with that for a second. Tell me in the comments if you recognize this in your own dog, especially that particular kind of stillness. If this gave you a new way of understanding what comfort actually means to your dog, subscribe, because there is more of this kind of story waiting, and hit like so more owners unknowingly doing exactly what this video just described can find it and finally see the difference too.